Alright, so we're checking out the iFlight Defender 25 Cinewhoop in this video. For those of you guys that fly the Avata or have flown the Avata and are not interested in remote ID and kind of want to move away from the Avata, this is the drone I think you want to move to next. It's under 250 grams, so no registration required and no remote ID required for this as well, as long as you're using the smaller 550 milliamp hour battery. We'll talk about all that in this video. So for the rest of you guys that don't fly the Avata, that are more traditional RC FPV pilots, I think this is a trend we're going to see going forward, or these kind of products here, at least the ones that are centered around the DJI-03, kind of proprietary in terms of all the parts and everything in here on this particular model, not necessarily things you're going to be able to swap out for other components. For example, if you're thinking about buying the frame kit and just building your own, for example, you have these 3-screw motor mounts instead of 4-screw for these 1404 motors, so things like that are going to get in your way in terms of doing a custom build of this. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but until more of these 3-screw mount motors are available, that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. But before we get into the drone, let's talk about what we get in the box. So obviously, you get the drone, you get this battery, it's a 554S, and then you get the battery charge adapter that's included. And I'll show you how to use this in a second. You're going to need some cables. That's also included with the charge adapter. The balance lead, XD30 and XD60 adapters, and then you also get this naked GoPro cable, and we'll talk about what you would want to use that for here later. Spare set of props. I'll talk about the props some more as well. They're interesting. A whole bunch of these stickers and stuff I peeled off of the drone, although traditional warnings and stuff that iFlight usually puts out for their stuff for beginners. I peeled those off, and that's on this here. Get some spare screws and Allen wrench for those screws. These are standard M2 screws. You get these couple of these, like I think this is like a sticky pad for the battery area underneath the battery that it was not installed. Maybe it will prevent it from rattling around. Didn't really notice any issues with that in flight. You also get some stickers, some warning documentation, and some stuff about the Express LRS receiver if you happen to get the Express LRS receiver. If you get a different receiver version of the Crossfire, your documentation might be a little bit different. Alright, so let's get into the drone itself and the design. It's a pusher design, 2.5-inch props, 3-bladed. As you can see here, got some LEDs here, prop guards on the side. A lot of plastic parts here, and I'm pretty impressed with the way iFlight is able to make a lot of injection molded plastic parts in their drones, and they can do it really quickly, which is kind of surprising because that's not necessarily inexpensive to do, but they seem to do that quite often instead of traditionally 3D printed parts are typically found in a lot of new models, but this is like the prop guards, this little camera mount is injection molded plastic, the main part of the frame is injection molded plastic. So it's not super durable. Like, I mean, if you're going to go bando bashing with this one, you're probably going to break something. Most likely these prop guards, they do have spare parts, of course, if you need to replace anything. Not necessarily sure how easy this is going to be to repair. Shouldn't be too hard, because basically you got the frame part with the prop guards, and then you have these little pieces here that hold the battery together. This camera section here. Get your O3 air unit, of course. This one comes in an O3 air unit version. And then, of course, the carbon plate, the main plate that holds the motors on. That's the main foundation that basically holds the whole quad together. Now, I think there's been some drama surrounding the way this drone looks. They're saying, oh, it's a clone of the Avata, it's a clone of something else, blah, 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 it's a copy of whatever. Typical stuff that happens whenever a new model comes out, but this is actually a really old design. And if you go back, I think a couple years when the ProTech 35 came out, it was a standard frame. The motors were, instead of inverted, it was on top. and it looked like this and had this sort of design. But basically, if you look at the Protect 25 version, which is basically the same as the Protect 35, if you look at that frame and flip it over, and I'll put a little diagram of what that frame looks like flipped over, it looks like this. Now, obviously, they've made some modifications, obviously, to accommodate the O3 air unit. For example, putting the air unit down here, the flight controller, and then this little camera mount. That's kind of going to be all new. And of course, the whole proprietary battery mounting setup here. But essentially, it's a flipped over Protect 25 from like 2 years ago, and using obviously updated components. The O3 air unit, for example. The most important, most obvious, the flight controller in here is like a Blitz F7 based flight controller, and all-in-one. Does not have a Betaflight OSD because obviously don't need that for digital. So if you're thinking about using that particular board in an analog system, you can't do that. Again, these are kind of proprietary parts specifically for this model. And then you have your USB port that comes out of the back. There is a little light here. So when you plug that battery in, it'll show you the status of the battery. If it's green, it's full. I think yellow is kind of like a middle voltage, and then red is basically it's a dead battery. The motors on here are a 1404 size motor at 4150 kV, so clearly for a 4S setup. These props are made by iFlight. They're 2.5-inch props. They're bull-nosed, as you can see here. Surprisingly quiet. I was expecting this to be louder. A lot of 2.5-inch Cinewhoops are pretty loud. This one's not that loud. And here's a little clip of it taking off. So obviously they've done some optimization of this prop for this model to make the sort of the whole quad sound a little bit less noisy than you would typically find for a lot of Cinewhoops. So this whole proprietary battery system is kind of a plus and a minus. You're tied to just the batteries that they provide, and they only have two types now, a 550 and a 900 milliamp hour for two different sizes. It's going to give you two different weights, of course. So there's these pieces here that hold it together, spring loaded, and that'll let you pop the battery out. So it's pretty easy to get the battery in. There's a little lock here in the front. You have to click that in, and then it will stay in. It doesn't really move around too much. You can kind of hear it a little bit, but it's solid. You can crash this, and it's not going to pop out. These little spring-loaded mechanisms are fairly solid. But yeah, you can see here, LiPo pack, 16.8 volts. It's not a high volt, and 550 milliamp hour. The 900 milliamp hour is basically the same size. So you can see here on this one, it says 900 milliamp hours, but they're the same dimensions, obviously, because you want to fit this into that same slot there and on top of the quad. And everything is the same. You got the same little balance link connectors here, which you'll use for the charging board. Obviously, the difference is the weight, and I'll put all this on a scale here in a second. The battery comes with an XT30 connector, and these little plug protectors are on all the batteries. See, these are 3D printed, and pull those off. And pretty simple. You just slide the battery in like this, pops down, stay on, and then we'll just go ahead and plug this in. And we can see we have a yellow light here. I think this is a storage voltage. Some purple lights here for the LEDs. Now these are pretty bright, so they are even visible during the daytime. Now because it uses a standard XT30 connector, you could just put a regular battery on here. Now these little clips that hold the proprietary battery on, these are removable, so you have some M2 screws here and over on this side, so you could pop those off if you want to use a different battery. But I've tried this Eachine 1100 milliamp hour 4S, and this does sort of fit in here. And of course, this is XT30. It'll plug in no problem. Or I don't think you want to go any more than 4S. I think the flight controller can go up to 6S, but the motors will probably fry once you take off. So don't do that. 4S is the max, but this will stay in here kind of okay. But obviously, it's not super secure. If you want to go with standard batteries, I would probably recommend taking these little parts off and then figuring out some way to mount a strap on here. I think there's probably going to be some extra parts, 3D printer parts you can screw down here, then run a strap this way, and then probably put some Velcro or some sticky pad stuff here. And of course, as long as it has an XT30, it'll work with this one as well. So I forgot to mention the flight times on these two batteries. The 550 will give me roughly 5 minutes of flight time, and the 900 gives me roughly around 8 minutes of flight time. You're going to get more or less depending upon how you fly, and also conditions, if it's windy, if you're flying indoors, etc. Less stress you put on the motors, and if you're flying more casually, not as fast, you're going to probably squeeze out more flight time. You're flying more aggressively, a lot of throttle, you're going to get less flight time, so just keep that in mind. All right, so I do want to talk about how this charging system works, because these are a little bit different than your normal setup. The battery just kind of pops in like here, and then these are the little pins for the balance lead for each of the cells that will correspond to this. So it just pops down like that. It stays in no problem. You're going to plug in your, this will pop up here. This little plastic or this little rubber part here will pull up, so you have to hold it down. So pop that in. I'm going to hold this down. Then you're going to plug in your XT30 here, like that. And now that'll stay in. And then you're going to need a charger. So this is one that you can buy off of iFlight. This is the M4AC. I have a whole video on this particular charger. If you want to know how to use it, I'll refer you to that video, link it in the video description. I'm not going to cover that in this video because I have a whole video on that already. But you're going to select the parts that you're going to want to use. This one here has an XT30 connector, so we'll use the XT30 adapter, and I'm going to plug in like this. Plus and minus is noted here. Plus positive is red and negative is black. And then you have your balance lead. You're going to plug that in here like so. And it should look like this. And once you power up your charger, you're going to plug in your XT30 here. And then you're going to plug in your balance lead over here, like so. And then you just go through the menus and charge up the battery to 16.8 volts or 4.2 volts per cell. So this charger is not included. I don't think this is included in the ready to fly kit either. I'm not sure why. They probably should, but if you get the regular, just the Defender 25, it'll come with a charging adapter board plus one battery. But if you want to if you don't have any chargers, or if you don't have any hobby rechargers, you can just pick up this one. It's like $25. If you want to get the ready to fly kit with, I think it comes with the Commando 8 Express LRS transmitter plus the goggles, the goggles 2, which is like $650. That's pretty much everything that'll get you up in the air, and I think you just need to add the charger. I'll link that one also down in the video description. Okay, so you guys have noticed that there is a mount here for a naked GoPro. If you do want to get GoPro style footage, you can put another camera up here if you want. However, with the latest update on the O3 Air unit, they came out I think around the beginning of the month, January 5th, I believe. Has 10-bit color now, and it's basically pretty much on par with GoPro image quality, in my opinion. I'm going to have a whole video on that one later. I'll talk about that. It's not really appropriate for this video, but I don't feel like a naked GoPro is really going to give you any benefits. Just going to add more weight and get you over 250 grams, which means you're going to have to register the drone. If you don't care about that, then yeah, you can go ahead and do that, of course. Go nuts. The camera angle is adjustable up to here, and you can go kind of flat like that. And I did, it looks like it's soft mounted inside, and the inside it's not super tight, and it has a little bit of give. So I think that is for vibration dampening. Although the rest of this part here is hard mounted. I did not experience any major issues with jello or a lot of vibrations. The pitch tune on this one's pretty good, and I did not use an ND filter in any of the footage. If whatever vibrations come out, it will come out, because it's not going to be hidden by any ND filters. If you're wondering, did not use anything like that. Now I did. I'll show you a couple flights. I'll link those down in the video description. They'll both be obviously 4K flights from the air unit. The drone comes with angle mode out of the box as default on aux 2, and you can't turn it off. And I think they do that for beginners that maybe have come from maybe the Avata that don't know how to fly in acro mode. I personally don't like angle mode, but I'm going to put that flight down in the video description if you want to see what that looks like in terms of what kind of footage you're going to get. It doesn't look super great, in my opinion. It's not as smooth looking, especially on the roll axis. Now, when I have another flight, I'll put also down in the video description that'll be in acro mode, so no angle mode. Much more smoother and that flight footage. Just you'll see the difference. Click on both of them, you'll and watch the difference between angle mode and acro mode, and you'll understand why you'll eventually want to learn how to fly in acro mode to get the smoothest footage out of this. Now, granted, with all that said, this does have a very good pin tune out of the box. No major issues with vibrations or oscillations. I flew, really well out of the box, typical of most iFlight products. So really no complaints there. All right, a couple of things here to note before I show you the weight of this. There is a option to turn or start and stop your GoPro recordings on your naked GoPro. That's what this plug is included for, and I don't know where that would plug in on here, and it doesn't seem like it's documented anywhere. So yeah, I imagine you probably have to take this off, and maybe there's a plug under here or something like that. I didn't see that documented anywhere. Maybe it's in the user manual somewhere that I might possibly have missed it, but it is pre-programmed into the Betaflight settings on one of basically they're called one of the user modes, and you can basically put that on a switch that is a momentary switch. So you click that and then it'll start recording, and then when you land you click that again and it'll stop recording. But that's something you'll have to set up on your own. It's programmed in there, but you still have to set up your aux channels for your transmitter for that, because it's on, I think it's on aux 8 and 9 or one of those. The other one is the VTX switch for turning on and off the air unit, and this is a pretty unique feature on this model. I haven't seen this on any other model yet. It's also on one of those user modes. It's on like aux 8 or 9, and you have to assign that to your switch somewhere in your transmitter. So if you do want to power off the video transmitter, if you, for example, want to plug it in, and maybe you don't want to necessarily have video right away, don't want the O3 air unit to overheat, you can set it up so that the air unit is unpowered when you plug it in, and then when you flip a switch, once you've properly set up that user mode, it will turn on the video transmitter, and then you can go ahead and it'll connect to your goggles and you're ready to go and fly. So that's optional. It isn't a default setting because it's it's on aux 8 or 9, so pretty much not going to work on most transmitters, but you can set that up if you want. All right, so this is what the Defender 25 weighs just by itself, no battery. It's 171 grams. This is the 550 battery. So let me just show you what that weighs by itself. So the 550 comes in at 70.4 grams, and then the 900, it comes in at 100.3 grams. So that is going to definitely, I think that's going to get you over the 250 gram limit. So put the battery in here. This is the 550. And we're coming in at 241.5 grams. And then with the 900, it's coming in at 270 grams. So again, if you go with the 900, you're going to get probably about 8 minutes of flight time, but you're going to be over the 250 gram limit, and you'll have to register and do remote ID. But with the 550, you're going to get about 5 minutes of flight time, give or take. No registration required, no remote ID required. Okay, so in conclusion, I think that this is probably one of the best Cinewhoops, at least 2.5-inch Cinewhoops out there. If you're on the O3 air unit system, with the goggles too, if you're looking for just straight out of the camera, 4K footage, no remote ID, no registration required, there's not a lot of other options out there right now. You can go down to 2 inches, and there's some options right now. But right now, not a lot of 2.5-inch options. I'm sure there'll be more available later, but yeah, I do like the fact that they're going this route where they're trying to get things under 250 grams with the battery, but you still get, really good footage. And this is not necessarily, trying to please the tank crowd out there that wants, the most durable Cinewhoop out there that you can go bando bashing with, because honestly, that's a pretty small percentage of people out there. Most people, they just want to go fly and get some footage, maybe take this, on a vacation or a trip or somewhere and get some nice footage and on their trip. They're not necessarily out there to smash this into brick walls for fun, and I like the fact that they're trying to go with these lighter parts and everything and try and get the weight down so that you can basically optimize the drone for flight time and not necessarily for durability. But, you want a good balance. So this is not, this isn't going to break if you just sneeze on it, of course. It's durable enough. It'll handle most light crashes, but if you're, if you want to take this into a brick wall at 90 miles an hour, don't expect it to survive. But if you're just casually flying, not going too fast, it should probably handle most light crashes okay. All right, that's enough for this video. Got any questions, let me know. Talk to you guys in the next one.